Hello, friends. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me today for an interview with David Suich, who is a near-death experience researcher. David Suich is a retired engineer who founded and operated Steps of Hope Outreach, a nonprofit organization that served orphanages in Nepal, Mexico, and Haiti from 2003 to 2018. During a painful and chronic physical condition that triggered severe depression, he clicked on a YouTube video about an atheist who died momentarily and saw heaven. This led him on a 14-year journey of research into near-death experiences, including the testimonies of over 1,000 people who have died, seen the afterlife, and returned. David Suich is here to share with us some of the things that he has learned in his 14 years of researching near-death experiences, including what happens to people after death and the often asked question, how do we know these are real experiences and not just the creation of a dying brain? David Suich will be back tomorrow to answer some more of our commonly asked questions about near-death experiences. David's website and his book, God Took My Clothes, will be in the description. David offers spiritual counseling for those going through a spiritual awakening. He also wants me to let you guys know that he does offer free counseling for those with tight budgets, and he often gives away free copies of his book to anybody who emails him and asks. Thank you so much for watching. Here's David. Hello, David. Welcome to the channel. Thank you so much for being here. I am extremely excited about this interview. I'm really excited because you are so knowledgeable about near-death experiences. So thank you for being here and being willing to have this conversation.
Well, it is a pleasure to be here. And I like all the info you've got on Love Covered Life. That's an amazing channel you've got. It's a pleasure to be a part of it and contribute.
Thank you so much. So would you like to start by sharing a little bit of your background and how you got into studying near-death experiences in the first place?
Okay, I am a 56-year-old retired engineer. And back in 2007, I had been dealing with a worsening chronic physical pain. It was tendonitis throughout my entire body. And it got so bad at one point, I was having difficulty working. I had to take a couple of weeks off work, and I was very depressed. And I thought, it felt like life was over. And I'm sure there's people listening to this video right now that may feel that way right now or felt that way in the past. And I didn't know what to do. And I'd been prayed for over the years as this chronic, it was tendonitis throughout my whole body, was getting worse and worse and worse. Dozens of churches had prayed for me, hundreds of people. And I came to the conclusion that one of two things was true, because I had been brought up Catholic and then later Christian. I thought, well, either God doesn't exist, it's all a lie, or more likely there is a God, but I'm not a good Christian, or I'm out of his favor, and so he's not going to listen to my prayers. He wants nothing to do with me. And that was a very painful conclusion to come to. And I was just going back between my bed and the desk, because if I sat down too long, I had pain in certain parts of my body. If I laid down too long, I had pains in other parts. And I clicked on a YouTube video, and I wasn't even searching for anything about near-death experiences. And it was about a guy who died, saw the afterlife, returned. And one of the things that he said that really hit me is he was being brought towards heaven. And this guy was kind of a tyrant. He was kind of a mean character. One of these guys that always goes around yelling at people. And he sees this beautiful place he's being brought to. And he thinks he's made a mistake. They don't want me there. I'm bad. I'm garbage. I'm filth. And they stopped. And Jesus spoke to him and he said, we don't make mistakes. You belong here with us. And that's kind of when I realized, I hadn't been abandoned. I was never alone. And I started investigating near-death experiences. It started out slow. And then I started to toy with the idea of writing a book. And when I would talk to people about the book, they would say, oh, I know somebody who had a near-death experience. And then it just snowballed. I even had one guy when I was buying a car, he says, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm, writing a book right now on near-death experiences. And he tells me that the guy was missing an arm. And he says, oh, I lost my arm in a water skiing accident. I fell off the boat and the next boat hit me and severed my arm. And I got to the hospital DOA, and he told me his whole testimony. He was never going to speak to it about anybody because he thought nobody would believe him. And here he was overjoyed that, hundreds of people have had these experiences. So it just snowballed. And here it is 14 years later. I've never stopped. I still hear one or two a day. So I'm a member of Hawaii IANS, International Association of Near-Death Experience Studies, and several other groups. And I like to hear these stories because they're so uplifting. Just knowing our eternal nature, knowing about this loving God that's there, knowing about our bright future and the purposes of our lives here on earth. It's just the most uplifting subject in the world. I feel like a lucky man to be able to be involved in this arena. Now, a lot of people ask about, are the experiences real? So I have seen specials on near-death experiences where they have scientists come on and they explain, well, the near-death experience is actually it's a trick of the dying brain, you see, because when you die, all the cones in your eyes that sense the light, they start to contract. And so it looks like a light. And that's the light people see. Or they say things like, your brain releases all the serotonin and dopamine at once. And so that's why you have these feel-good feelings. Well, to anybody who's studied near-death experiences for any length of time, those are not legitimate ways to dismiss it. The only way to dismiss it, you would have to say there is a massive coordinated conspiracy over time throughout the entire world of these people who die, which of course makes no sense. When you look in the eyes of somebody and they're talking about an experience that can't be described in human terms, that's so beautiful that, some of them cry, that's hard to fake. And I've seen that over and over and over again. And it transforms lives. These people come back just drastically different people. They are less materialistic, more altruistic. That whatever they were chasing in their life before, whether it was money, fame, career, now they're interested in love, loving their fellow man, loving themselves, meaningful relationships, service to humanity. They changed careers. One man who was a billionaire gave up all his ties to finance and became a family counselor. Another man who was a policeman said, I don't want to carry a gun anymore. I don't want to be violent, and became a high school teacher. And of course, the first near-death experience I ever heard, Howard Storm, he was an atheist and a professor of art, and he gave up that career and became a pastor, I think, in the Methodist church. Is it Methodist? I don't recall. Anyway, so it drastically transforms these people's lives. And there's other things that can't be explained. Some people will be told that, they get to heaven and the person says, well, I'm your brother. And the guy says, well, I don't have any brothers. He says, well, yeah, your mom had a miscarriage. And upon going back to Earth, they asked their mom, did you have a miscarriage? Your child died, but well, how did you know that? So things like that. People who are blind since birth describe being able to see. They can describe the colors of the uniforms of the nurses and doctors that worked on them. They can recount conversations that happened in other parts of the hospital while they were dead. They shouldn't have been able to be in that other part of the hospital. There's all sorts of evidence that's just overwhelming. So anytime a new concept is proposed, it's always looked at with ridicule. 500 years ago, when Copernicus wrote his book on the revolution of the celestial spheres and suggested the absurd, he said, well, the Earth's going around the sun, not everything revolves around us. They thought he was crazy. Everybody thought he was crazy. And he turned out to be right. Even the guy in 1912 who suggested the continents were slowly drifting over the surface of the Earth, the scientific community laughed at him. But it's only going to be a matter of time before we realize that there is this all-powerful creator, and these incarnations are just temporary lives that we have. And we're going to be well aware of our eternal nature. The people who are first out there, well, we're going to be laughed at a little bit. So let's talk about the near-death experience and what it's like. There's a process of dying, and the process of dying itself can be very unpleasant, but the process of the spirit coming out of the body is quite wonderful. It's like taking off an old, heavy, restrictive winter coat. You're not affected by gravity anymore. You feel very light and very free. And Melissa, I don't know if you experienced this in your OB. I think you did, that you felt very free and light, and it was completely an unphysical experience. Some people see their body from above. Sometimes if it's at the scene of an accident or if it's in a hospital and there's people around them trying to attend to them, they realize that they can sense the thoughts and feel the emotions of the people. But when they try and communicate with these people, nobody can hear or see them. Now, people say, were you like a ghost? And no, you're the opposite of a ghost. So when you come out of your body and you're in the spiritual world and you're in the real world, which is the spirit world, you feel more alive and more real than you've ever felt in your life. I mean, this is the height of life. It's like the filled up with life. So if you imagine being in a dream state, you think your dream world is real. It's only when you wake up and you go, oh, this is the real world. That was just a very fuzzy, not very real world. Well, imagine taking one really big step to a higher level of consciousness, and that's what it feels like. People report having super senses. So first of all, you have vision where you can see all around 360 degrees. There's no blind spot back here. Your hearing is very acute. Your sight is absolutely perfect. You can look at a flower on a mountain 50 feet away and you can count every petal. People have reported being able to zoom in and see the molecules and cells of their own skin. Or they can look at another planet far away. So you can focus on anything you want and see it. And your hearing has a far higher range. In any case, at that point, sometimes they revive, they go back into their body. And if the experience is more extensive, they not necessarily see, but something draws their attention, usually off to the side or behind them. And they look and they see a little pinpoint of white light. And it's 10,000 times brighter than the sun. It's not at all harmful to the eyes. If you had a light 10,000 times brighter than the sun, it would blind you and burn you up. But in the spiritual world, it's not at all harmful. You can look right at it. And they're attracted to it like a magnet. Now, this is the typical near-death experience. Heaven creates an environment to make the individual person feel comfortable. So if you're a big fan of nature, they're going to bring you into a park. If you miss your grandmother, who was your best friend when you were a child, and you just spent all your time with her, she's going to be there to meet you. But a lot of people do come into this light and they describe it as completely indescribable. So we come up with the best analogies we can. That white light, I mean, I've never experienced it myself. You have, Melissa, and there's no words for it. There are no words to describe that light. To even try, some of the people I interviewed, they don't even want to try. Some can't get the words out because they start to cry when they think about it, because it's the all, it's the everything of life is to experience the love of that light, and they get to it and they can't describe it. So all we have is analogies. And, I could talk to you all day about what it's like to skydive, and you could listen to 1,000 people talk about the feeling of what it's like to skydive, but you wouldn't know what it feels like till you jump out of a perfectly good airplane. So, which I foolishly did many years ago. So it's like that. You have to experience it. So there's a few analogies. One man said, imagine the strongest love you've ever felt in your life and multiply it by about 1,000. And that's what it feels like. Another guy said, take the 100 happiest moments of your life where you were just overjoyed and put them all into one moment, and you still don't come close. People don't have to be told that this light is God. It's just like the universe reverberates his name. And the light is glorious. It's warm, not a temperature warm. It's a warmth where it just feels like these arms are surrounding you. It feels like the universe is hugging you, and you feel the kind of love and happiness and joy that you've wanted your whole life on earth and never been able to get close. And it's there. And when some people are given the choice to go back or not, nobody wants to go back. I always laugh when I hear somebody say, oh, when I'm in heaven, I'm going to golf, or, I'm going to scuba dive, or I'm going to do this or that. And I'm like, no, you're going to want to be in that light. That's how good it is. There's a feeling of peace in that light. There's a feeling of purposefulness, that everything that's happening is for a reason, that there are no coincidences. There's a feeling of protection, that this being is going to protect me forever, that there's nothing that could happen. And the being of light we call God is so powerful that, you know without a doubt that this being is going to protect you, that nothing can harm you. And people also report being part of this light. So they realize that they're a little facet of this light. They're a unique perspective of this light. They realize that there's some of them merge and realize there's no difference between them and the light. They're part of God. So it's quite a transformative experience. Some people have conversations. At some point, this being may say, you can stay if you want. You finished your life on earth, you finished your work, or you can go back. And of course, nobody wants to go back. Some are told it's not their time and they have to go back. But God's very wise. So, if I heard the testimony, the person came back, and what they will generally do, whether it's God or sometimes it's spiritual entities, angels are talking with these people, they will show you the benefits if you go back, or they'll show you how your loved ones will suffer. They might show a woman, if you don't go back, this is how it's going to affect your son's life, and he's just never going to recover from it. It's going to affect us. So people tend to want to go back to do more good work and to support the creation process. So that's the basic near-death experience. Now, there are lots of other elements. Some people have what's called a life review. And the life reviews can vary, but generally they take you through your entire life from beginning to end. Now, it's not like watching a movie or, just going through a bunch of bullet points. This is different. We in the physical life have only known reality from the perspective of one person, right? Me. So I see from my eyes, I hear from my ears. Well, in your life review, you experience either some highlights, some experience everything they ever thought, said, did, or felt. And you get to experience it at the same time from the people who are around you, as if you were that person. So I'm going to give you an example. One guy got in a fight. He was quite a bully, and he was driving, and I guess a pedestrian illegally crossed the street in front of him, and he had to brake, and he gets into an altercation with this guy. And being the big, strong bully that he was, he gets out of his truck, and it goes to blows. And he punches the guy and beats him up and leaves him unconscious there in the street. When he's having his life review, he was there again, just like when it happened. Everything was that real, indistinguishable from reality. And he's punching the guy. At the same time, he was experiencing it from that man's point of view. He was that man. He felt all 34 blows. He felt his nose breaking. He felt his teeth breaking. He felt how ashamed that man was when he went home and, I got beat up in a fight, told his wife. He felt the fear that guy had in public for a long time. And similarly, people who do something good, you may just pass by a homeless guy, and say, oh, you want the rest of this sandwich? I'm not going to finish it, and think nothing of it. In the life review, you'll experience her from that guy's perspective, and maybe he hasn't eaten for 2 days and he's overjoyed to take a bite of that sandwich. So you get to experience what your actions and words had in terms of effect on other people, good or bad. And it doesn't really seem to have a whole lot to do with intention. Like, if you're coming up to a four-way stop and you're texting on your phone and not paying attention, and the guy to the right thinks, oh, he's being nice and letting me in and waves, you're going to get those good feelings. Or if you, try and give somebody a compliment and they misinterpret it and think you insulted them and they're hurt, you're going to feel that hurt. So what the life review is trying to teach the people is that everything that we say, every word that we say to another human being has an effect, good or bad. And the whole purposes of our lives down here is to really treat others with love and compassion. And just as, Jesus said in the Bible, I'm not a Christian, but I do believe in a lot of the biblical principles, universal love, peace, forgiveness, that kind of thing. The whole purpose of life is to love God and love your neighbor as yourself. That's what we were born in this world to do. That's what we were created to learn down here. And some people have a hard time with it. The life review can be the only part of the afterlife that's extremely unpleasant. And sometimes if somebody who treated others really badly is going through this, they feel awful. Now, there's no judgment from heaven. Sometimes you're in the presence of God, Jesus, angels, spiritual beings, and they're fine. They understand that we make mistakes down here, but often the person themselves is very upset that they didn't do better. And sometimes they have to stop the life review. And whoever this person is with, they have feelings of love shined upon them, love and acceptance until they're ready to continue. But it's really to teach us how important our interactions are with other people. And what I've learned personally from the life review is that, things like revenge, that's impossible. If you get revenge against somebody, well, I'm going to experience all the pain they suffered in my life review. I've also learned that it's impossible for me to help another human being without helping myself. I remember I was out bike riding one day and I saw this poster and it said, "None of us are well until all of us are well." That's pretty much what life reviews have taught me. So let's talk a little bit about the various realms of heaven. So I've heard a few testimonies where they went to higher realms, and there are an infinite number of realms. There really is no such thing as heaven or hell. There are just realms that the collective groups of souls create with their consciousness. So the pleasant ones are collectively called heaven. The unpleasant ones, where they decide to disconnect from source or God, are collectively called hell. But let's talk about what I'm going to call the first level of heaven. Now, there's no real levels of heaven any more than there are levels of love. How many levels of love do you have for your newborn child? There's no such thing. There's many kinds of love, but you can't really divide them up. We have to, because we're linear in our thinking and we tend to kind of separate things. So the first level of heaven is kind of laid out like earth. And there are roads and trees and buildings and houses and parks and lakes and mountains. But it's very beautiful. So a lot of people arrive into some of the parks in heaven. And some people arrive in these flower gardens, and they say the flowers are glowing with their own light and singing. One guy arrived in a park and he said it was a beautiful park. It was really beautiful. And I said, "How beautiful? Like Yosemite National Park?" And for those who don't know, Yosemite National Park in California is one of the world's best parks. People come from all over the world to see it. And he said, "Maybe 100 times more beautiful than Yosemite." The colors of heaven are completely indescribable. I mean, imagine going from black and white, seeing in black and white, to seeing in color. And that's a small step. And take another big step up. If any of you ever watched those YouTube videos where they put the chroma glasses on, and the colorblind people see for the first time, a lot of them cry because they've never seen such beauty of colors. Well, wait till you get to heaven. We have 3 primary colors here on earth: red, blue, and yellow, or you can use red, blue, and green. And a mixture of those 3 colors form all the colors we see. In heaven, there are over 80 primary colors. So people come back from heaven and they say, "Well, I saw these colors that were amazing." Well, what colors? Well, I can't tell you. They don't exist here. How do you describe a rainbow to a man who's been blind since birth? How do you describe a symphony to a man who's deaf? It's impossible. So they can't describe the experience, but it is indescribably beautiful. And you can communicate with plants. You can communicate with animals. My aunt, I was pretty surprised. I was talking to her during the time I was doing my research for my book. And she said, "Well, I actually died when I was giving birth to your cousin." And I had a near-death experience. And she said when she got to heaven, she walked by this plant that looked like a common house plant. And the house plant said to her, "Hi." And she said, "You can talk." And the plant said, "Well, of course I can." So you can communicate with animals. One man saw a giant lion playing with a bunch of kids like it was a domesticated cat. So everything in heaven, there's no sun or moon in this first level of heaven. Everything glows with its own light. So people have described giant buildings in heaven. They describe giant cathedrals that are made of these crystals that glow with their own light. And they say, sometimes if they're with a guide or, one of their relatives who've died before them, they say, "Hey, you guys are copying our cathedrals, like our stained glass." And they, no. See, we don't have crystals that glow with their own light down here. The closest thing we have is stained glass. So we copy them. We subconsciously know what the cathedrals look like in heaven. So we copy them. What about hearing? Probably the best description of what it sounds like in heaven because you don't need your hearing for communication. There's a mind-to-mind communication where it's absolutely impossible to make a mistake, and it's very quick. Near-death experiencers have been told, got a download of information, and they say it happened in a split second. If I was to explain it to you, it would take me a week. So you really don't talk in heaven or listen in heaven for communication. It's really for the music. And Don Piper, in his book 90 Minutes of Heaven, really described the music. I actually put the quote of his description of the music in my book. So if you get a chance to read either one of those, it's a really great description of the music. Basically, our best, most beautiful music sounds like a child banging on a pan with a stick. That's how good it is. It fills you up and you feel like you're part of the music. And it's just joyous. And there's parts of heaven where there's praise music all the time. A few near-death experiences talked about hearing a giant shout reverberate through heaven. Like when we jump up at a football game, when they make a goal at the last second. Oh, this happened to one guy being taken through heaven, and there was a shout that happened. And he said, well, what was that about? And they said, oh, this man who was kind of a lost soul, he came around. He came back to the love. And there was just this joy and celebration. And so our guardian angels, actually, the people in heaven who watch over us, they shout and celebrate just like we do at a football game. When they see you, humble yourself and forgive this person that, you really didn't do anything wrong, but there's this animosity, and you just humble yourself and say, you know what, whatever went wrong between us, I'm sorry, please forgive me. When you do that and you just one tiny kind act of love, they love it. They jump up and down, they cheer for us to follow the path of love. So we got a lot of people in heaven rooting for us. So that's the basic description of heaven. There are higher realms, and I've heard attempts that people try and describe them, but each one is more wonderful and glorious than the last. And there's just no way to understand it from our earthly perspectives.